Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. It's Tuesday, it's Blast from the Past Day. But it's a slightly different Blast from the Past Day for two reasons. One, it's late in the day because I totally forgot. Just pottering away doing little things and odd jobs and stuff, and I suddenly thought, crikey, I haven't done a video today. Woo! I mean, I did say I might miss a day now and again, and I do, but I have something I can do on a Tuesday following my day off. I've got no excuse. So despite it getting a bit late in the day, now I've found something. What I'm trying to do with the Blast from the Pasts is to find you something different each time. Because obviously the videos I can do in here are geared up to what I've got, the time of year and what's going on. It's a sort of, it's not live, but it's like that, if you know what I mean. It is a now thing. Whereas the Blast from the Past, you know, it goes back to 2016. You know, we've got 9 years worth of videos stacked away here. And I'm trying to find things to put variety into the channel via this one day a week, the Blast from the Past Day. So today it's a field trip. So it is completely different. I haven't done a field trip for a while. There's a lot of the places I like to go are a bit like that, and I can't do it anymore. I can't do those sorts of field trips anymore. So I brought one of those out. Now this is a visit to a rather unique woodland. It's not very big, there's not much of it, and about a third of it you can't go into. It's actually private. There are some things in there that are so rare they don't even want people to know what's in there, although I can guess. But basically it's a woodland environment, it's a beech woodland. Very old beech woodland, so the trees are very large, very high, leaving vacant space underneath in the main. And there are 4 main native orchids in there, all of which are quite rare. One of them, I know another place quite close, because this is quite a way to go to get to this place. I've been there twice, but one of the types of orchids, there's a place quite close by. In fact, it's just round the corner from where the Bournemouth Orchid Society used to have their show in Wimborne. So it's just up the road from Wimborne. So one of the orchids, I know another place. And in that place is a single clump of about 5 or 6 of one of the other types of orchids. And the other 2 types of orchids I have never come across anywhere else. They are about, you know, if I want to travel and I want to do some investigation, some detective work, I could find all 4 of these in other places, but it would take work. And I knew that by going to this place, this was an organised trip to do with the Orchid Society. However, when I'm outside in the wild, I like to do my own thing, and most of the time I'd rather do it on my own with nobody else in sight. My favourite expression: if I can see somebody in my binoculars, they're too damn close. So anyway, I got there early, well before the tour was due to start, and did my own thing. One of those things was very naughty, but I didn't know it was at the time. I found out later. There are some places you can go where you think it's okay, and then you walk round the corner and see the sign saying no, you can't go here. Yeah, well, you know, if you come in the back way, then you don't see the sign, do you? That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. So anyway, that's the video, but before we start, I want to do a couple of little things in here first. So I shall get the camera down and we'll just have a look at a couple of items I just want to show you. Right, so we get the camera down. There we go. Now the first thing is my Deesers. Several people have asked, how are they doing? Well, quite honestly, they're doing quite well. We've got definitely flowering size Deesas that are healthy and growing. So as far as I'm concerned, the ones I've got left, which is nowhere near the number I once had, these are okay and they're safe. That's good. The other thing I want to show you, this Cymbidium copper, it's one I've had quite a long time, is opening at long last. Now these are large blooms. Yeah. Now once I get one fully open, I'll dig the plant out of this corner and get it somewhere where we can see it. So there's that to come. And several people have asked about Hannah's orchid. I might not have made it obvious that it came back inside. And it came back inside for two reasons. That's one of them, and that's the other one. It's got two spikes. This one is extending at a reasonable rate, and this one started to. Now, when it came in, it was absolutely soaking wet. I mean, this cannot get near any of my other plants. It's heavily virused. Even a half-wit would realise that. So it can never get near anything else. And I take a minor risk by having it in here. But as long as it doesn't touch anything else, bearing in mind viruses tend to be transmitted through damaged tissue, well, there isn't any damaged tissue. Although it's all heavily virused, it's not damaged. It hasn't got bashes on it and cuts and things like that, and it's not getting repotted. So as long as I don't get anything else near it, it's relatively safe, and I'm prepared to do that. You might wonder what this is. Well, having just touched that orchid, I'm not touching this till I wash my hands. But I repotted a Coleogyne not too long ago and cut a back bulb off. And I got a almost curt comment saying, "You should know which one of your friends likes propagating back bulbs." So having thrown it away, I've had to dig it out of the rubbish bag. And of course this rubbish bag's a bit soggy, so I've dried it off. The problem is I won't actually see, it's my friend Helen, I won't see her for a while. She's going on an extended holiday period to celebrate the end of a particular birthday year. Her son and her daughter graduating. There's lots of things culminating in a holiday somewhere where there's going to be some native orchids over in the Far East somewhere. I forget where she said. Can I remember? No, I can't. Anyway, somewhere in the Far East, up into the tropical rainforest type thing, you know, an expedition. I envy people who can do that sort of holiday. I haven't got that sort of money. I can't spend. I haven't got the money, so I can't spend it. But yeah, so that's what that's sitting there for. And this bloomed very well last year. It looks like it's going to do it again. A single new growth and two lovely spikes coming on. So that's that. And the other thing was the twinkle. Somebody said, "How's your twinkle doing?" Well, in fact, it's three separate plants on this mount, and the plant that looks the worst is the one that's got the buds, and they're starting to show colour. So it shouldn't be too long, and we'll have some twinkle blooms. Right, so that'll do. That's a long introduction. The video is a field trip. It's got quite a long introduction of its own, explaining about what I'm up to and everything. And as I said, it involves a specific place that's just a little bit unique. It's a small area of beech forest with some orchids in that are very difficult to find elsewhere, and all four of them are in the same place. That's what makes it a little bit special. And one of them is not often found in a forest. Tends to be normally found in more open places, you know, like the edges of forests and things like that. So anyway, I hope you enjoy it. And again, it's filmed on my old camera, and so the resolution's lower than my normal videos. So yeah, blast from the past, a field trip.
Okay, this video on the wild orchids that I went to see is I'm doing it differently and adding a soundtrack because there are some very interesting points that would be better said than put in pop-ups. It was an organised walk, organised by somebody from the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Nature Trust. Yes, I needed to go and see the orchids, so I took part in the organised walk, but that's not really my thing. I like to do these sort of things on my own. So I got there very early and did most of the filming prior to joining the others on the organised walk. And quite honestly, apart from in one instance, which I'll get to in a minute, the guy only pointed out what I'd already seen. So, it was still enjoyable, met up with some friends, we chatted as we went round, disturbing the peace and quiet of the woodland. But I will say at the beginning, the quality of the videos is poor. This camera would not focus properly on the tiny little orchid blooms amongst the undergrowth in the incredibly low light levels. We'd had a stormy night, everything was soaking wet, so it was nice and fresh and green, but wet underfoot and all that sort of stuff. And although the DSLR can be controlled, I haven't got the level of control on the video camera, but I now need to work on that, because if I get in situations like this again, I don't want the camera to let me down. It's good enough that it should have performed well, but it needed some help from me and I didn't have that knowledge. So the videos are not as good. But I took some good stills, so we've still got some sort of shots of the actual blooms and things like that. So let's get going and have a look at a very, very special woodland. I'll just explain why it's special. It's a beechwood, English beech trees, and it's an ancient woodland on chalk-type soil. Now, there are many beechwoods that come into that category. Many, many. And I certainly don't even have to travel that far from home, because I was quite a long way from home. But over the millennia, whatever, there are a lot of fungi that have evolved in the soil in this beechwood. And it's that combination that makes this woodland special, especially in one particular orchid's case. And literally it's the combination of the two that have allowed such large populations of these four orchids to actually exist. You can literally go half a mile up the road to a wood that looks almost identical, and there are none of these orchids there. It's just this one place. And it's that association between the fungi, which are dependent on the beech, so that's where they live, in the soil around the base of the beech trees. The beech trees are not totally dependent on that fungi, but the fungi are dependent on the roots of the beech to exist. And the orchids have an association with that fungi, which is why they're found in this place. So let's go and have a look round the wood, and I'll sort of narrate it as I go along, and we'll see how we do. So this was a typical clearing, shall we say, the understory of the mature beech trees. And in amongst this very, very low vegetation were the first two orchids that I went to see, and these are swordleaf helleborine and white helleborine. And I must admit, while I was filming, I didn't know the difference, so I thought if I just film everything I see, somebody will explain it later. Anyway, this was the first reasonable bloom, because some of them were going over. These are very, very delicate little white flowers with a yellow throat. If they were bigger, they would be reminiscent of our, tropical orchids, some of those that we grow. But pretty little things, just. And as I sort of looked round, they were everywhere. This is a rare orchid, so this is a special place. I was just really impressed by the sheer number of these blooms. Just sticking out of the ground, it was just a wonderful sight. As I say, I'll pan round in places, but the numbers of these I was impressed with. Now I can see why it's a special place. They were just everywhere. The difference between the two I'll explain when we get to the stills. I have I had actually already filmed both types, but I didn't know at the time. The difference is obvious once somebody tells you, but I didn't have that knowledge at the beginning. So yeah, I filmed around this clearing. I found out later I shouldn't have been in it because it's fenced off, but not from the way I came at it, it's not. I always like to burrow through the undergrowth and not take the paths. And I'd come into the back entrance of this clearing, so I didn't see the warning that you're not supposed to be there. There weren't any no Roger signs. It's as simple as that, you know. If I'm out in the woodlands, I walk where I want. And I didn't realise, you know, that some of these orchids are in the middle of the path and you can already see some people have trampled on them. But yeah, lots of them, just everywhere you look. Now, this wood is managed. These clearings are maintained. They are cleared. And English Nature go round and count these orchids every year to monitor their numbers. You know, it really is that special a place. So yeah, that's the video of the first two that I was after. Sorry, focus, yeah, I did have trouble focusing, you know, it's just a pain in the backside. Okay, so looking at this one then, this is the sword-leaved helleborine. The difference is the leaves are longer and thinner and the blooms open because they're pollinated by insects, and therein lies the subtle difference. Yeah. So that's looking at one in situ, just poking up through the undergrowth with its flowers waving in the air, ready for the insect pollinators to come along and do their thing. You can just about see on this shot little brown spots appearing. We don't only get them on our tropical orchids in our homes and grow rooms, they appear on the wild ones as well. And these had apparently, according to the guy, these brown spots had appeared in the last couple of days because we've had rain. So they've got wet. So, you know, they're not at their best. They're not pristine blooms. But nonetheless, I was impressed. You know, I searched out and tried to find the best ones I could find. These were the two largest spikes right next to each other, but you can see the blooms are already fading at the base of the spikes, and brown spotting in places like that. So anyway, that one, relatively long thin leaves, and the leaves do not go up into the spike. So those are the traits: open blooms, long thin leaves, and the leaves stop at the first flower. Now this is the white helleborine. This is self-pollinated. It does not need insects, so the blooms don't open. They have a tiny little gap where the insects can crawl in and do their thing. But if you look on the flower spike, the leaves, they're shorter, and they carry on up the flower spike in amongst the flowers. Now, if these two were in separate places, I'd have a job to see that difference, but having somebody there to explain it for once was a bonus. So again, white helleborine, leaves travelling right up the stem, and blooms not open. Very, very rarely do those blooms open. The insects just crawl in and do their thing. And that's how they work. So that's the first two. That's two ticked off the list as far as I'm concerned, and was well pleased. Okay, this next one is tiny, and I mean tiny. This is the fly orchid, and it's a mimic. Its blooms mimic the pollinators to attract them in to do their devious work. You can see these little sticks with little yellow tops on them. That's where the people who monitor this woodland go round and mark the spot where they are, and you can see they've even cleared out around the base of the plant to give them their full chance to be pollinated. And I really did have trouble getting this camera to focus at all on these. They are so tiny, but luckily I got some decent stills. Well, reasonably decent. The tiniest of orchids, and I could imagine if these weren't spot marked or somebody didn't point them out to you, I don't think you'd see them. You'd have great trouble finding these, and I didn't ever expect to see any at all. So to find reasonable numbers in one place, again, absolutely well pleased, but I just could not get this camera to focus properly. but you get the general idea of how they grow and where they grow. As I say, they are mimics. We've got quite a few orchids like that mimic the pollinator. So there you can see a spike, in isolation, with the tiny little blooms. They're basically green sepals and petals, and the lip itself resembles the body shape and colouring of the pollinator, which is what attracts them in. They don't do the fragrance thing, they do the visual thing. So, totally different mechanism. There aren't a huge amount of orchids that work that way, but we do have quite a few in the UK. I found a nice little group where several spikes, were together, and the light was a tiny little bit better here, but still not good enough for that video to get a good shot. So I was lucky. If I hadn't had the DSLR and relied on the video, we wouldn't be looking at, the detail levels on these blooms. They are tiny. I'm well pleased with being able to tick these off. And the last one of the woodland orchids is totally different to most other orchids. This orchid has evolved to actually be a parasite, and it's parasitic on the fungi that live in the soil, and as such it has no need for chlorophyll. It has no leaves and no green parts whatsoever. It just sticks out of the ground and it's brown, in amongst the brown leaves. Oh yeah, very easy to find. And you might wonder why I'm filming my car. This was the giggle. This is the one I didn't find on my own. This is where I changed my shoes and put my heavy walking boots on. And I didn't see that right under my nose. Now my excuse is I wasn't really looking yet, I was doing my shoes. But yeah, if these hadn't been pointed out to me, I may well have missed them. They were right where I parked, literally right on the edge of the path. And then there was a group of them just inside the woodland, but that odd one was right by the car door where I changed my shoes. You can just about make out the others. These are difficult to spot. Once you get your eye in, they become a little more obvious. But yeah, this group, bloom's just starting to go over, so next year I'll go 2 or 3 weeks earlier, and now I know where they are. They'll be in the same place next year. They're not going to suddenly migrate to a totally different place. But yeah, this is the bird's nest orchid, and no chlorophyll and a true parasite. If the fungi weren't there, this orchid couldn't exist. It helps germinate the seeds and support the plant throughout its life, and it puts the blooms up to produce seed and do it all over again. So very, very strange orchid. Not a really good still, because again this was in deep shade. Even the DSLR had trouble with this, but that's what they look like. A parasitic orchid, no chlorophyll, no leaves, no green parts whatsoever. The majority of the plant is living underground, and those spikes don't last long. That's the only bit that ever shows its nose above the ground. Very interesting orchid. So the next part of the day I decided to go on a few miles up the road to a very, very high spot, highest point on the South Downs in fact. So this was mainly to get some food and a drink and see if I could find a couple of butterflies. I didn't hold out a lot of hope. There was no sunshine and quite a breeze, and butterflies they're not on the wing. But this was the place. The hill is called Buster Hill. There's a radio station on the top, and this place is called Rake's Bottom. The rake is the large escarpment that sticks out the back of the hill, from the high point and gradually slopes down. But it forms a valley, and in the shelter of that valley, one of the butterflies I hoped to find, which was the Duke of Burgundy fritillary, but none were on the wing. There is a problem, an inherent problem with going down into a very, very deep valley. You've got to turn around and come back up again. There were several choices. This was one of them, and I looked at that path and the size of that hill and I thought, nah, I'm getting too old for this. So I chose to walk back up the valley. I had no choice. I had to get back to the car. And this is the first hill that beat me. I had to sit down on many occasions. This was so steep I couldn't put my feet flat on the ground. I was walking up on the tips of my toes. I hurt a bit today as a consequence. That was a hard hill to climb. Lesson learned. If you go down a steep hill, you got to turn round and get back up again somehow. Either that or do about a 3-mile detour to get back to the car. Anyway, back near the car park, definitely a theme coming here. I did find a couple of orchids. These are common spotted orchids, and they're quite variable. They can be almost white to quite a deep purple, and they can have spikes that are short and dumpy and very squat plants to quite tall plants, but they get their name from their spotty leaves rather than anything to do with the blooms. And this was one just in isolation, quite near the place where I got my sandwich and a coffee. Yeah, I mean, they're very attractive blooms, but like most of the English orchids, the UK orchids, they're tiny. And they tend to have, this is more the typical shape. You know, it's a spike sticking up out of the grass or the undergrowth with lots and lots of blooms on that are tiny. And identification can become difficult because a lot of these are beginning to hybridize with neighbouring orchids, and the hybrids are getting difficult to actually identify. But I did find a nice group of them, literally on the track that leads to the car park. Seems that all the best things I saw today were where the cars go rather than out in the open spaces. But yeah, I mean, I did find a few orchids. No sign of the butterflies. The other one was the grizzled skipper. That can be found in many places, but the Duke of Burgundy, or His Highness, as is known in the trade, the numbers are depleting badly. Nobody really knows why, but the numbers are dropping off badly, and I've virtually missed my window to film that this year. They're coming to the end of their flight season. But I ended the day with some orchids and a long drive home, and just as I got home the sun decided to come out. Yeah, smashing. Don't we love our weather forecasts? But a good day, good group of friends, some good orchids, a good day. Well pleased.